Hey friends, welcome back to the show. I'm excited to have Eman here with us today. If you're watching on YouTube, by the way, Eman, you look gorgeous in your beautiful, beautiful headscarf, everything, just the patterns popping on camera.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course, of course. Iman, you're a loyal listener of the show. I so appreciate that. I was telling you before we hit record that I could tell how much intentionality and thought you put into your pitch and really working with us to refine this case study, which you guys are in for a really good one. This is a topic that I feel like every single person has at one point in their business been like, what does that mean? And what I'm talking about is this topic of niching down. If you've been in business for honestly more than a day, you've probably heard at some point some person tell you you need to niche down, you need to niche down. And there is so much power in niching down. I think both Iman and I can very wholeheartedly attest to that ourselves in our own businesses. But the question of how do you actually niche down is not often talked about as much as why you should do so. So that's kind of what we're going to dive into today. Iman is going to actually walk us step by step through her how, and she was able to niche down and really make significant changes to what she was able to earn in her business, literally going from charging $76 an email write to now charging $400 to $450 per email. So that's just one piece of a bigger project or retainer with a client. That's what we're getting into. So you have that to look forward to. But before we get into the case study, as you know, Iman, I have to ask you, what is your Cubicle to CEO story?
Of course. So I back in 2017 to 2018, I was working for a local food charity as a communications expert. I say I was like running the communications department, but I was the communications department. It was that typical kind of charity vibe where you have one job, but actually you're doing kind of like three, four roles within that one job. So I was the social media manager. I was creating video content. I was creating case studies. I was doing the copy for the website and emails. It was so much. And within all of that, I knew that I really, really loved the copywriting aspect. I absolutely loved that I could send an email to donors asking them to donate to a cause, the thought and strategy that went behind kind of sending a specific email and then sending it out to donors and then actually watching the donations come in. It was the most rewarding part of my job. I absolutely loved it. And it was amazing for me to just see the power of words, the power of copy, the power of email. So I was in that job for a year. I really loved it, enjoyed it a lot. However, I had a then 2-year-old, and life was very difficult in that I was having to travel to a different city most days for this job. And so I'd wake up super early and take my son to nursery. And I wouldn't be able to pick him up in the afternoons because actually the evenings because of work. I couldn't get back in time to pick him up. So I had to hire a childminder to go pick him up. And so every day I would kind of rush home to hopefully beat him falling asleep because I hadn't seen him all day. We're on maybe like 12 hours now. So every day I try and get home before he fell asleep, and every day he would be asleep. But he'd be asleep on the couch, on the sofa, because he refused to go to bed without me. He at 2 years old knew that I wasn't there and was waiting up for me. So sweet. But he was so tired that he could never stay awake. So I would walk in and he'd be asleep on the sofa. And every time I just wanted to cry. And it got so bad that I actually started to feel quite depressed and quite low. And I remember just feeling, like I had taken this job because I thought it was what was best for us, for our family. And actually it turned into the situation where I wasn't seeing my son anymore. I really wasn't seeing him anymore. And it was devastating. And on top of that, I wasn't making a load of money. I was working really hard. I was working some evenings and weekends. I was always available for this job and in this role. And, that wasn't reflected in the money that I was making. And then my lifestyle had completely kind of just been turned over, really. And of course, I was missing my son. And I just thought, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't how I imagined motherhood to be. This isn't what I want for him or for me. And so I decided to resign. I did have a conversation with the manager first, but he made it very clear that this role would never be a, work from home full-time kind of role, even though it could have been, but that's just not what he saw, envisioned for his office, which is totally fine. But then I had to then make that decision of, well, this isn't going to work for me. So I put in my 4 weeks notice. I still had to work those 4 weeks. And in those 4 weeks, I just behind the scenes was getting everything ready. I was getting the website ready. I got an old friend to take some photos of me so that I could feel a little bit more professional, get my website up, started my social media, and just kind of prepared myself for what was coming. I knew I wanted to start a business because I had tried twice before and failed. But this time was different because this time I had my son and I knew that traditional employment just wasn't working for me. I wanted to be in control of my own life. I wanted to be able to take my son to the doctors without having to call up an office and ask for permission. Like, for me, it was crazy. And I just thought, I'm a grown adult. I want to decide when I, take time off. If my son needs to be somewhere, I need to be able to take him. I want to be, able to take my own holidays with him whenever I want. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I kind of prepared everything in the background. I let people know publicly on LinkedIn, like, hey, I am actually leaving this role. I'm available as a freelance copywriter. Get in touch if you need me. Little did I know that people had been watching the work that I'd been doing for this charity and were super interested in working with me. And so, again, I knew that I had no choice. This had to work. And so threw myself into it. And I left that role on a Friday. By the Monday, I was sat in this basement office with no windows, sat at this desk thinking, right, I need to figure this out. Had my first client, and the rest is kind of history. That was 5 years ago now. So I now have a second child as well. So lots has changed. I went from, £15 an hour. I know we'll go into this, but those early days were so hard, kind of £10, £15 an hour, to now six-figure business. I went from being a generalist copywriter. So literally those early days, I would take on anything that anyone wanted me to do. Like, if you need me to write, I will do it. Send it to me. And then as I gained more confidence, of course, I decided to specialize in email strategy and copy. And so now that's what I do for my clients. I work one-to-one with course creators, coaches, membership makers, creators, and service providers too. And I help them make more money with their emails and newsletters. And not just that as well. I help them create an email community. I help them build a better relationship with their subscribers, so that, their subscribers kind of go from fans to super fans who want to engage with them and buy their products.
I love that. And I can totally resonate. I think anyone listening to this podcast can probably resonate with the pull of wanting the autonomy, right? Over your choices, over your schedule, over many things, honestly, your pay rate as an entrepreneur. So that story is probably familiar or feels familiar to many listening to this podcast. And I think it's so great that now you're a mother of two and that you get to have all of the things that you could only have dreamed of back then. And 5 years into business, congratulations, by the way. I know that's a big milestone a lot of small businesses never actually reach. So we're making it. I'm kind of on a similar timeline as you. Just, I think, wrapping up my 6th year, maybe, or starting my 6th year. Yeah, that might be what it is. I think 2018, 2023, it's about to be 2024. Yeah, 6 years. So
Yes.
we're right. I'm like, have to do the quick mental math. I think that's right around the same timeline. And I feel like that's a perfect entry, by the way, into your case study of how you started as a generalist, a general copywriter that would write about anything, to now focusing on email. And I'm actually I want you to insert your early hot take on this, which you said I think this was maybe in your pitch to us to be on the show. You said niching is not the only way to be successful in business, but it's the fastest way. So why? I want you to expand. Why do you think that is? And to that point, how do you pick a niche or test a niche if you're unsure yet what you're best at or what you want to be known for?
I'm going to answer the second part of that question first, because I feel like that is the part that always comes first, where people are like, well, how do I know what to niche in? How do I choose it? And I feel like with me, my niche really chose me because of my experience. My philosophy around this is don't niche too early. I think there are so many benefits in niching, but I also think that it's a mistake to niche too quickly. I think you should give yourself time to really explore and try different things. I'm really happy that I spent those first couple of years as a generalist, because it meant that I was able to gain an thorough education in all different aspects of copywriting, all the different types of copywriting. And so what that means now is that if someone comes to me and says, oh, can you do this type of copywriting? Can you write me a sales page? I absolutely can. I don't have to say no because I don't know how to. I feel very confident doing that. And so it means that I still have all these different doors open to me. So with me, what happened is I was just really enjoying writing my own newsletter. And because of the way that I started building my newsletter, which was through local workshops in my city, the people who were joining my newsletter were people that I was seeing regularly at these local workshops. So I was getting this in-person feedback from people who were on my newsletter, which is super rare, really exciting. And they were able to tell me that they loved my newsletter. They found it funny and, interesting, and it made them pause and reflect. And people used to tell me it's one of the only emails that I will stop and read in my inbox. I got such good feedback that I just thought, you know what? I really love this. People can see that I love it. Other people are loving it. What if this was the only thing I did for clients? What if this was the only thing? Why am I depriving myself of this love and this enjoyment? Let me do more of this. And so for me, I really feel like my niche found me. I wasn't looking for it. I was really allowing myself to just explore. And so that's the philosophy I kind of approach this with when it comes to that. When people ask me, don't niche too early. Don't force yourself to pick a niche. If there's something that you really love and you really enjoy and you can see yourself doing it for a long time, because that's the thing about niching is you get so deep into it. You really have to enjoy what you do. For the longevity to be there, you really have to love it. And so when that thing comes to you and you meet that thing, you realize this is it. This is what I love to do. That's your niche.
And I just want to add to that. I totally agree, by the way, Iman, that not niching too early is actually the better route to go, because to your point, like you said, unless you come into business already with so much clarity and passion on one specific thing and you can take that far, unless you already have that, if you don't have that clarity, I think the best way to find clarity is to get in the action, right? To try different things, to explore. And I went through a very similar experience back when I was building a social media marketing agency. We used to do everything. I remember at the beginning, like someone was like, can you run my LinkedIn page? Yes. Can you do Instagram? Yes. Can you try Facebook ads? Yes. Right. It was like yes to all the things. And then over time, we really, really niched down, not only to Instagram as a platform, but also like a very specific component of Instagram, which was like engagement and growth for e-com brands. And, I've left that part of my business behind for the last few years. We no longer have an agency, but I can very much relate to what you're saying about how if I hadn't given myself that time to be more of a generalist, I don't think I would have really been able to hone in on my niche with the clarity that I did, because I had the experience and the data to back it up. So just wanted to double tap that. On the other side, going back to that hot take of why niching is the fastest way to succeed in business, it's kind of an interesting poll, because on the one hand, we're both saying, right, take a little time, allow yourself to explore, don't niche down right away. But at the same time, if you want to go fast, you need to niche down. So like, why do you believe that? And how do these almost, what is the word? Like, seems like how do these opposite thoughts almost exist and can exist as truths in the same plane?
Great question. Here's why. Because you need to take that time so that you can figure out what is obviously the right niche for you, so that when you do pick it, you can just fly and you can soar with it. And so going back to this idea of, again, because I sincerely believe that niching is not the only way to be successful in business. I know plenty of generalists in all different types of industries and fields who are doing amazingly well. But for me, I've seen that it is the fastest way to grow your business. And here's why. So when you have a successful niche, I say that's usually because you followed these four principles. Your niche is clear, as in you say what you do and it's super clear. It's easy to understand. Nobody ever needs any clarification. There's no like, could you just explain that a little bit? There's none of that. It's immediately easy to understand. It's easy to remember. So people, when they're thinking of you, they instantly remember what it is that you do. And it's easy to communicate verbally and in the written form as well. So when people are talking about you to other people, it's very easy to communicate what you do. And the easier it is for people to understand your niche, to remember your niche, and to communicate your niche, the more successful you will be in your niche, because it's so much faster for you to kind of grow. All these things propel you and your business forward. You're making it easier for your business to grow. And so I found something that a lot of people laugh about, and I get a lot of people saying this, funnily enough, and no one ever knows how many people say this to me. So my name is obviously Eman Ismail, and the second part of my surname has the word male in it, right? And so everyone is always like, you need to do something with that name. You need to do something, right? And people have started saying Eman is email. Eman does email. That's who she is. That's what she does. And it's become so easy to remember. That's all I need people to communicate and all I need people to remember. Eman does email. So that when someone's in a room and they're talking about email, Eman, I know the perfect person, Eman. Or, I'm struggling with my emails, Eman. I know who's going to help you with this, it's Eman. I don't need people to remember remember that, I'm a heart-centered copywriter who works with XY, no, just email. And I'm sure we'll go into this, but I am a huge proponent of something that I've termed the one word niche for this reason. The one word niche is the idea that your niche should just be one phrase or one word that makes it super easy for people to remember what you do and communicate what you do. So for me, it's email. For Rachel Rodgers, it's seven figures or millionaire. For Jasmine Star, it's social media. For Amy Porterfield, it's online marketing. It's this one word or this one phrase that people will always relate to you and your business. And that's what will help your business grow faster. You're making it easy for people to help you grow your business.
100%. You're really igniting that word of mouth army for yourself, right? And I really like what you're saying about it's all about the recall for people. Like, that's the thing I feel like of your four principles that really stood out to me. And I'm just going to repeat them again for our listeners because they're so powerful. And I want you all to write this down if you haven't already. Eman said the niche has to have four principles: clear, easy to understand, easy to remember, easy to communicate verbally and in written form. I think that distinction too adds an even deeper layer to what you're sharing. But the third part, the number three, easy to remember, I think that recall again is the missing piece for a lot. To your point, your niche could be clear and easy to understand for someone when you are the one relaying it, when you're the voice sharing the thing. But if you're then asking someone to duplicate yourself and to go tell someone else about what you do, if it's not easy for them to remember how to talk about it, then they're not going to talk about it, right? So I would love for you to expand a little bit more on this idea of being easy to communicate both verbally and in written form. Do you have an example that comes to mind of a niche that maybe is one but not the other, and then how you would go about fixing that? Or maybe even in your own use case, like, did you start with toying around with some ideas that were easier for people to communicate verbally versus written, and then you had to kind of modify to make sure it was smooth in both areas?
Yeah, actually, I have two examples. So for me, my example is that initially I used to call myself an email conversion strategist and copywriter. And that's what I am, email conversion strategist and copywriter. That's really hard to say, let alone to remember. And so I had to kind of really think about how important the rest of it was. And while I feel it's important, I can live with just email. As long as people just know that it's email that I do, that I help with, that's the most important part. So initially I used to introduce myself as Eman Ismail, the email conversion strategist and copywriter. That was a little bit difficult. I'm Eman Ismail and I do email. I help, businesses make more money through email. I'm an email strategist and copywriter. Even just, taking out that one word just to make it slightly shorter, just making it as easy as possible to say and communicate. And I think another example, which is very different, but is equally important, is a lot of people now like to call themselves, I'm going to use my industry as an example. So in the copywriting industry, I've seen a trend of more and more people calling themselves ethical copywriters. And some people would think that would say that is a niche. That's my niche. I'm an ethical copywriter. But nobody but that person knows what that means. Nobody knows what that means other than that person. I feel so strongly about this. I feel like this might upset a few people. I don't mean to upset anyone.
It's okay. We have to have strong opinions sometimes. So yes, please share. This
Right?
is your hot take. Yes.
Okay, this is my hot take. But here's an example of someone that I think does that really, really well. I actually just want to find who the person is because I want to make sure that I give them credit. This person they call themselves a cruelty-free copywriter. And I just think that is so clever because it immediately tells me who they are, what they do, what their interest and specialism is. So immediately I know that this person is only working with certain brands that identify as cruelty free. So immediately, if I know that somebody ever is kind of needing someone in that sphere, that's the first person that I'm going to think of. I'm looking at her Instagram and she's called Topaz. I don't know her personally, but she calls herself the cruelty-free copywriter. I've been watching her brand and I just think it's really cool because she's gone a step further from ethical copywriter, where nobody knows what that means, to cruelty-free copywriter. And she says that her niche is cruelty-free, whether it's plant-based snacks, vegan leather accessories, or natural skincare products. And I think she's done that really well.
Yeah, that's such a great example. By the way, even though you don't know her personally, I feel like you should totally send her this episode when it goes live, just to compliment her work. I know it feels great being on the receiving end of people noticing your work, So I think that is such a great example. And exactly what you said, Iman, like being an ethical copywriter, I totally understand where there might be confusion because ethics as a whole is a very complex, I mean, there's whole philosophical debates about morality and ethics. And right. So it's like there's so many varying perspectives on what it means to be ethical. And so I like that cruelty free, like you said, it's very clear because it's a term that people like the general public is already familiar with, right? Like we read a label, we see cruelty free, we understand innately what that means. And so I always tell people, not so much, I mean, yes, from a messaging perspective, but just in general, like anytime you're talking about your business or what you do or what you offer, the less brain calories someone has to burn to try to understand you, the easier it will be for them to give you a yes or to support you. So I feel like those examples that you just gave are such a great way to really showcase that in action. And also the fact that people literally say Iman is email. Like they're making you synonymous with the word email. I'm just curious, beyond being clear and repeating yourself often, saying like I'm Iman, I do email. Outside of that practice, is there anything else, any other tips that you have learned along the way for how to create that really strong association between yourself and a single word or phrase?
Yes. And I call this controlling the narrative. I had a very embarrassing experience that taught me this the hard way. I usually send anyone that I'm doing, a talk for or any kind of workshops or anything like that, I'll usually send them my media kit beforehand so they have my bio because I want to control the narrative. I want to make sure that I am giving them the language with which to describe me. I don't want them to come up with their own language. And as a copywriter, I know how important this is. I know how important words are. I don't want them to just come up with their own words to describe me. I want to be in control of the language they use to talk about me because that's the language that then other people associate with me. But this one time I was a speaker at this online summit and I had forgotten to send to the speakers or to the host. And so I get on this Zoom, they introduce me as a 7-figure copywriter, which was kind of embarrassing because I'm not. I'm not a 7-figure copywriter. I mean, I aim to be, but I'm not there yet. And so I had this moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm live on this summit and they've just introduced me as a 7-figure copywriter. And I could see where they got confused because I work with multi-6 and 7-figure businesses and brands. So that's where they got the 7-figure from. So I could see the confusion and I'm thinking, okay, well, I can't actually start my talk without addressing it because it feels really dishonest. And so I felt like I had to say something. And so I corrected them and let everyone know on the call, like, hey, I'm not a 7-figure copywriter. I intend to be one day soon, but I'm not quite there. This is who I help. And then went into my talk and it was mortifying. And so that was the last time I ever forgot to send across that tool to help hosts introduce me and to talk about me the way that I want to be spoken about and to describe me the way that I want to be described. And I realized that it's so important because especially when you're doing visibility work and marketing, it's vital because, I mean, if people don't understand what I do, the whole opportunity is a wasted opportunity. And so I really need to, I need to make sure that I'm controlling the narrative always. And so that's actually done in 2 ways. So that first way is giving people the language with which to describe me. And that might be just as simple as giving them my bio before they start talking about me to their audience. But then also the other way is to make sure that you are putting out the right messages. So Jeff Bezos says your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I say your niche is what people say you do when you're not in the room. So and this was me, initially the portfolio on my website included blog posts that I'd done for clients and it had all the kind of charity clients that I'd worked with. And it had, website copy work that I'd done and a few emails kind of sprinkled in here and there. But then if someone was to go on my portfolio and see all of that, none of that was in alignment with what I was saying I did now and who I was saying I was. And so it's really important that there is that alignment, that if I'm now saying that I'm an email strategist, I only work on email, I only do email, that when you come on my website, that you see that you don't see blog posts, that you don't see website copy examples that I've done for, past clients. If I'm not working with charity clients anymore, they're not my ideal audience anymore, then I don't need to have their logos all over my website. It's not in alignment with who I am, with what I'm doing. And so the other side of controlling the narrative is making sure that the messages you're putting out, again, are making sense and relate to what you're saying you do now.
That's really powerful to use that as a filter for, like you said, like what do you or who do you want to attract more of, and how are they being showcased, I guess, in your public portfolios or in the content that you're putting out across your different channels. And so I think that's really smart. I would actually challenge our listeners, if you haven't in a while done a self audit of your content, whether it's on your blog, your website, your about page, your social media, your story highlights. Oh God, I'm guilty of this. Like I have story highlights up that are years old for offers I don't even have anymore, like one-on-one coaching, So like things like that. But to your point, if they're out there, then what's to stop someone from seeing that and making an assumption that, that this is what you offer, this is what you do. So I think that's really, really a great reminder for all of us to do a quick little, I mean, not spring cleaning, I guess, because we're in November, but a little end of year tidying up of our content channels, and to make sure that what we're putting out there is actually a good representation of the work that we do. So I love those tips of controlling the language and controlling the narrative. And I just have to add in my own experience to really, I feel like, to resonate with what you're saying. And that is, it's interesting, Iman, and I don't know if you've noticed this, especially because you mentioned at the beginning of the interview that you started your copywriting practice kind of from meeting up with locals in your area and doing these local workshops. But I have noticed personally that how I describe my company, so to your point, the language that I use to describe my company differs depending on the setting that I'm in and the contextual knowledge that I know that particular audience has about the industry that I work in. So, for example, like if I'm on a virtual summit with a bunch of online business owners, it would not be out of the ordinary for me to describe Cubicle to CEO as a business media company, because at our core, like factually, that is what we are. But I've noticed that when I say something similar at a local business networking group, immediately you can just see confused faces, right? People are like, oh, you're a social media agency. Nope, that's not what we are. But they hear the word media and immediately jump to social media or marketing, because like that's the association they have. Or, whatever, they might come up with all of these different narratives in their head. But I've noticed if I switch my language slightly in those settings to, oh, I'm a podcaster, or like I have a full-time podcast, something that they can attach to that feels more singular and specific as a representation of the content that we create as a media company, I think people seem to click with that more. And I'm just curious if that's happened to you too. Do you ever switch how you talk, like the language that you use depending on the setting that you're in?
Absolutely. I think it's really important as well when I'm talking to potential clients who have had experience with hiring copywriters before, and they want to know, well, what's the difference between, this other person that I've worked with and you? And so that's when I can kind of change up how I describe myself a little or go into more detail. And that's where I would say, yes, I'm an email strategist and copywriter. And so here's why that's different. I'm an email conversion strategist. I focus on the conversions. I focus on, check the data. I'm figuring out how to optimize your emails after I've worked on them. The whole point is to increase conversions, because there are different types of copywriting, and they know that. They know that there's SEO copywriting and there's brand copywriting, and so they have a deeper understanding, which allows me to then explain why what I do is so different. And then, of course, one thing that I learned is that it's been really integral to being able to really, I guess, up level and be seen as an expert and understood to be an expert, is to use the term strategist to describe myself and to really become a strategist. Because what I was before was an order taker. A client would come and tell me, like, hey, I need 5 emails and I need you to write email 1 about this and email 2 about this and email 3. And then I'd just go away and do it, because as someone who was new to business, I was terrified of telling the client what to do. And so I would just do what they told me, until one day I realized that I am not serving my clients in the best way by doing that, by being scared and underconfident to tell them what they need. When their strategy wasn't working, I needed to be able to say, this is not the right thing to do. This is not going to work for you. And so I was able to obviously train and educate myself on how to be a strategist, and then come back and really step into that strategist role, so that now I'm leading my clients. I tell them what we need to do. I tell them the best way to do things, and they're grateful for that. They don't want to be thinking about this. They want to hire me so that I can go figure it out for them and then do the work. And so these key things in the difference that I'm in, the different kind of terms and words that I'm using to describe myself, is what has been pivotal in me being able to sell myself to those multi 6, 7 plus figure, businesses, business owners and brands who are really looking for that kind of next level of support. And so absolutely, you're totally right. You do need to have different versions of this language that changes depending on who you're talking to. And I found that me being able to describe myself as this email conversion strategist is what really, really changed the game for me, actually.
Yeah. And I like the distinction of earlier you said the less words for someone to remember, the easier it is for them to, again, recall you and actually refer to you. And so I like how in public settings, when you're, trying to create brand awareness, you're like, I do email, I do email, I do email. And it's very simple so that when someone hears the word email, they think of you. But then it seems that in your actual one-on-one, maybe discovery calls or sales conversations, that's when you are adding in this additional layer of, okay, I'm actually an email copywriter and strategist to really help them see your value proposition, right? So I like that, I guess, layered approach. And I just wanted to pull that out for our listeners in case anyone missed that. And also the whole analogy of being an order taker versus being the leader and telling someone this is actually what you need because I know this craft, right? I remember that was another thing that really stood out to me in your pitch for our podcast is you had a great analogy for this. It was like McDonald's versus a high-end like five-star restaurant. Can you just like real quick share that analogy to really help our listeners soak this in?
Yes. So initially, when I started business and I was a generalist and I was scared to, voice my opinion and my strategy, and I would just do what clients told me, I was very much an order taker. So I like to call this iteration of my business a McDonald's drive through. So the clients would come through and they'd just point at this menu that has all these like millions of things on it and say, yeah, I want this, 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 and this. And then I'd be in the back, like, like just really working away at it and like, destroying myself to get this working. And then I'd, run to the window and be like, here you go, here's all the things that you ordered. Go ahead, take it and go. And then probably honestly, not see them again because, they didn't have, why would they really have come back? Often I found as well that the emails wouldn't perform. And that was again because they decided what the strategy was. I didn't. And so again, I realized, okay, well, this isn't going to work. Actually, it's better for me to be in control of the strategy and take responsibility for the performance and the outcome as well. Now, when I changed my business, when I became the strategist and I stepped into like this strategist leader role, my business totally changed. And I like to think of this version of my business as a high-end restaurant. If you've ever watched Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, because it's just the best show. I love Gordon Ramsay. So he goes into these restaurants that are just like appalling. And they're having a terrible time. And usually the first thing he'll do is he'll go in and he'll taste the food so he can like figure out what's going on. And they'll bring him a menu and the menu will be like 30 pages long. And he's like turning the pages and it just goes on forever. And he's like, you serve everything. He's in an Italian restaurant that serves like burgers and like hot dogs. And he's just like, what is going on? And so the first thing he does is he cuts the whole menu. And to the extent that the restaurant will be left with like a one-page menu. And of course, the owner of the restaurant is usually freaking out because he's like, oh, they're like, you took away all our options. No one's going to buy from us anymore. But actually, by reducing the number of options and making it, very specific, you're creating this high-end experience. You're coming across as a more of an expert in what you do, as a specialist in what you do, and people value that so much more. So now, my potential clients and clients come to me, they know that I have a very set offer. They have this one page that they can choose from and, we'll figure it out. We'll, work together. If there's anything else that they ever need, but look, this is what we start off with. These are the options. And then they can go through this and they're not overwhelmed. They're not completely, stuck in decision fatigue because there are just so many options. Now they're at a high-end restaurant where this is the menu and this is what you can choose from. And if you don't like it, then this probably isn't the right restaurant for you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm so glad you brought up the phrase decision fatigue because that is exactly what I was thinking as you were talking. It's just the like as someone who is very indecisive in the minutia of life, like for big decisions, I actually am weirdly very decisive. But when it comes to the small things like ordering at a restaurant, if I go to the Cheesecake Factory and there's like 30 pages, I'm like, I don't even know. I'm so stuck in indecision, right? And that's actually an experience that I like eating or about eating at high-end restaurants that I really enjoy, when a waiter is actually very knowledgeable about the menu and the pairings, right? Like you can always tell the difference, like when you go to a restaurant where they really treat their food with such respect. Like they're like, oh, this you've got to, if you're gonna eat this, then this is the starter that you have to eat this with, and this is the drink that's going to really bring out the flavors and XYZ, right? I just feel like it's like you said, it's such a different experience. And I guess even if we all kind of zoom out beyond like the online business world and just look at regular everyday business, I can even see that having the same effect as a consumer. Like for myself, I get really overwhelmed when I step into a regular grocery store because it's just so many aisles and there's so many things going on. And that's why I regularly and loyally shop at a store like Trader Joe's, because it's like 4 aisles and you can get through the entire store in like 15 minutes. And I know exactly what to expect. And there's limited choices, but the choices are good choices that I want and that I will come back for over and over again. And so I feel like this is such a great analogy. And I would love for you to also frame for our listeners, when you did decide to pare down your own quote unquote menu of services to offer clients, how did you choose which were, like, I think you have two signature services, right? Like, how did you choose what those two are going to be? And how did you, I guess, choose the price points that you did to offer very clear choices? Because obviously, if one is much, much less than the other, then it's like you're going after, I guess, a very specific client for one versus the other. So can you just kind of walk us through your process of how you pared down your signature services?
Absolutely. So I had I and still have the VIP week service, which is me working on your project and only your project for 1 week, 7 days, and then you get the project delivered on the seventh day. It's a very focused, very specific project, very intense, and its delivery is fast. And then my second signature service was my email audit. So with the first service, you're coming to me for a specific email sequence. We're working on one email sequence. You will get that at the end of the 7 days. You want me to do it all for you. It's done for you. But with the email audit, this is the almost like the entry point service that is much lower in price, that gives people a feel for how I work. It's for that client who is maybe not sure about this whole email strategist copywriter thing, but wants to try it out. So they'll kind of dip their toes in with the email audit, and then they may go on afterwards to hire me for the VIP week for me to do that project in full. But the email audit also might be for someone who has a lower budget, who wants me to analyze what's going on in their email strategy right now, who wants tailored recommendations on how they can improve their conversions without me taking it all in, and starting from scratch and writing it all over again. They want me to go in and be a consultant and analyze what's going on so they can do better. And I will say that now I have a third, which is a custom project. So that's where the client can come and say, look, what I need doesn't fit into these two. I need this, this, and this. And so we'll come up with their own custom service, custom package. But I will say that I've only added this third on now because my lifestyle allows for it. And so when I came up with these two signature services, the VIP week and the email audit, it was because I was actually pregnant, expecting my second child. And so obviously with pregnancy, I was exhausted. I was on a limited time frame. I realized that I had a certain amount of time to make some money basically for my maternity leave, because I wanted to self-fund my maternity leave. I had recently moved country, and so I was in that weird position, that weird place where I wasn't being supported by like any government. I wasn't going to get very much for kind of maternity leave. It was really on me to figure this out. And so I knew that I wanted a higher ticket offer, which was the VIP week. That would be like just such amazing value for my clients that it would seem like a no-brainer. And then that lower price kind of entry point service. And so with my VIP week, what that meant was my projects were limited. There were never any projects that were going on for months and months, which can often happen with copywriting projects, because I didn't have months and months and months for the project to go on for. I needed that clear kind of limit and time period. And so again, I wanted a high ticket offer so I could save for maternity leave. And so it was actually a case of me sitting down and realizing what I needed for my life. It was kind of a life first strategy. Well, this is my goal. How am I going to make that happen whilst also making sure that I'm providing like the best service and the best value that I possibly can for my client? It's interesting because it came from a life necessities, and then me sitting down, figuring this out, drawing out my offers, and really just putting it out into the world and seeing what happened. Because I did start off with VIP days, and VIP days did not work for me. Those things had me anxious. I was like, this is not for me. I cannot finish this huge project in a day. I would be working, into the night, so that I could deliver the next day. And it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my family, my lifestyle. And I was just like, this, I can't do this. I know some people can, and that's amazing, but it wasn't for me. So, like, what can I do that still feels, exclusive, that still feels special, that still feels high ticket, but gives me more time so that I can really put the work, the thought that I want to in this? Because I'm the type of person that I need like a day to just think about things. Like, I'll do all the research part of a project and then just give me a day to think so that all the things can come together. And then I can go into the sequences and write. So I needed that time. And that's when I decided to extend this service from a VIP day to a VIP week. And actually, again, it's all about experimentation. If something doesn't work for you, try something else and see if that does. Because actually, it turned out that my clients loved the VIP week more because it made them feel more special. Like, I was dedicating an entire week to them, and I could promise them that there were no other projects that were going to take my focus away from their project. I was all theirs and they were all mine for 7 days, and they loved it. And so that went really well. And it actually got to the point where I would get on sales calls with prospective clients and I would only offer them the VIP week. And I would say, this is how I work. This is my process. This is the delivery of the work. And actually, they were amazed and excited to think that we could, from us starting the project 7 days later, they could have the delivered product. And so what's been great is actually making sure, because again, I'm a strategist, I'm tracking the data, I'm tracking the results, keeping in touch with clients to make sure that these VIP weeks have been effective. And I've been able to see that my clients have had amazing results. And so, yes, everyone's happy.
You actually took the question right out of my mouth. Which of these services do you lead with? So it sounds like you lead with the VIP week. And then if that's not the, let's say maybe they're not ready for it or they don't have the investment for, is that when you then try the audit as a downsell? And what are the two price points of these two offers?
Exactly that. Initially, I would go with the VIP week. And also, that would include like doing customer surveys, customer research. So there was all of kind of that aspect. And so sometimes a client might say, I don't really want all of that, or I don't need all of that. And so then I'd go in and say, okay, well, maybe we need to do this instead. Maybe the email audit is for you. And so when my prices have changed now, but back then, I think it was for the VIP week, it was 3,250 Great British pounds for the VIP week. And then it was 1,000, I think, for the email audit. Yes, that was then. That was 2 years ago. And now the VIP week is, I've also switched to charging in USD. So I'm going to switch to USD now. The VIP week is just under 6,000 and the audit is 1,800. And I've been able to do that because I have been able to, again, track my results for clients. So I've been able to prove that I am not, your results won't suffer because I'm spending less time on your project. I have one client who I worked with, she booked 2 VIP weeks with me. Oh, and by the way, I would do a little discount if someone booked 2 VIP weeks back to back, as an incentive to sell more than one. This client that booked 2 VIP weeks, I worked on her email, and then something I want to talk about actually was this like secret service of offering a sales page with that email sequence. And I mean, I've been checking in with her. I've just finished a case study with her, and so far she has made 1.2 million pounds and counting from the evergreen funnel that I worked on in these VIP weeks. And so less time doesn't mean less quality. My clients still get amazing quality, and I can prove that. And so I've been able to say, like, this is the investment, and this is what some of my clients have seen in terms of return on investment.
Congratulations to both you and your client for being able to deliver such results. And I feel like price difference is helpful for our listeners to understand, okay, when you're thinking about narrowing down your signature service, the one that you want to lead with is the one that you would hope the most number of people would actually sign up for. But then having other options in your back pocket, like a downsell, like an add-on, like a sales page add-on or a double week intensive for a discount, like those are good things to have in your back pocket. But I feel like that front end marketing of focusing on one specific offer, just like, on this topic of niching down, is more powerful for getting more conversion. So I'm really glad that you were able to walk us through a real life example of that, Iman. And to wrap up our case study today, I wanted to go back to this concept of customer research. You very briefly, mentioned the word, but something that you shared with us in your initial pitch to be on this show is that assumptions are dangerous, and the antidote to assumptions is customer, or as we call it here, market research. So one thing that I found really interesting about what you shared is that sometimes your current audience may not actually be the audience you are wanting to speak to or call in. So, for example, you mentioned when you were sharing your Cubicle to CEO story that you come from the nonprofit background where you wrote for a lot of charities, but that wasn't necessarily the client that you wanted to attract more of as you went out on your own. And instead, you're wanting to work with 6 and 7 or even 8 figure course creators, coaches, etc. So I have a couple questions for you on kind of how you, I guess, made that transition. And I believe, and feel free to jump in if I'm misremembering anything, but I believe that you had actually reached out to a few 6 and 7 figure business owners who were your dream clients or ideal clients and said, hey, like I want to work with more people like you. Could you hop on a customer interview call with me so I can ask you some questions? Do you remember or do you have a copy of the email where you pitched them for this customer interview call? Like, what did you say? Can you share a little bit there?
So I had come out of the charity sector, like you said, and I had accidentally fallen into this like accidental niche where I'd come out of the charity sector, and then all my entire network was other kind of nonprofit employees, workers, that kind of thing. And so they were the people who were approaching me to work with them, which was amazing because I was just happy to take on any work and I knew what I was doing in that sphere. However, a year later, a year and a half later, where I was still only working with charities, at this point, I'm kind of thinking, I didn't mean for this to happen. It feels like the worst thing when something in business is just completely accidental in a bad way. And you kind of don't know how you ended up there. And you just kind of think, oh, well, how do I get out of this now? And so my task was to figure out who I wanted to work with. Well, I knew that I wanted to work with for-profit businesses. I love working with women, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs usually, 6, 7 figures, 8 figures plus. And I just had no idea how to speak to those people. They were complete aliens to me. I was this copywriter who was kind of like 2 years into this. Was probably making kind of 40 to 50, maybe 40 to 60K a year, like maximum. And the idea of this like 6 figure business owner, 7 figure business, they just felt like unicorns. I was like, I don't know who these people are. How do I speak to them? How do I get them to notice me? How do I write copy for my website? Because this was my next big project. How do I write copy for my website that makes these people feel like I understand them? I know them. I'm the right person to help them. So of course, as a copywriter, the first thing to do, I know, is to do market research, to do customer research. So for me, those are voice of customer interviews or surveys or customer surveys. And these are things that I do for my clients currently. So I know how to do this. I'm trained in this customer research. So I wanted to make sure I went all in and that I did customer interviews with 6, 7 figure business owners. And so I knew of a few because I was in kind of their communities, but I didn't know them personally. So the first thing I wanted to do was find out like how they describe themselves, what they call themselves, because in my head, I called them entrepreneurs. And I was ready to write my entire website talking about how I serve female entrepreneurs. And I'm so glad that I did these interviews because I found out that not one of these people called themselves an entrepreneur. They all just called themselves online business owners. And so that meant I could go write my website and use the correct language to draw these people in, to attract the right people. And so my task was to just figure them out. They were aliens to me. I want to know who they are. What do they do every day? You know, what do they want in their business? Why would they hire someone like me? What are their struggles? What are their pains? And so I decided that I was going to go into the memberships that I was in and just ask for some help. Is anyone willing to do an interview? And so I've gone back into my Facebook archives. This is from June the 1st, 2020. So at this point, I've been calling myself an email strategist and copywriter for 5-6 months now, but I'm still struggling because COVID hit in March. It was a very difficult time. And so now I'm thinking, right, I need to figure this out. So I go into this Facebook group that I know is full of, it's run by someone she's called Corey Javid, and she is a 7-figure business owner. And I know that this group is filled with other 6 and 7-figure business owners. So here's my post. Fancy a free Starbucks? Hey, I'm doing some research and wondered if you might be able to help. I'm looking for entrepreneurs, e.g., coaches, course creators, authors, podcasters, e commerce owners who wouldn't mind chatting to me for half an hour about their business, dreams, and motivations. Basically, I want to know why you do what you do, what motivated you to set up your business, and what motivates you to keep going. This would be a really chilled 30-minute chat. In return, I'd love to gift you a free Starbucks voucher. If you want to chat and one, have an email list with 1,000+ subscribers, two, would classify yourself as a six-plus figure entrepreneur, please comment below or drop me a DM. Thank you for reading. And then in the comments, I put PS Corey Javid and then tag to the owner of this group. I would absolutely love to chat to you, question mark, but no pressure, smiley face. And then Corey replies and says, hi there. Hi there, Eman. I would love to chat with you too. Let's set it up. Send me a DM and we'll book it in. And so then we move to the DMs and I say, hey, Corey, thanks for connecting with me. Hope you're well. And thank you for agreeing to chat to me. Context, I'm an email strategist and copywriter for six-plus figure female entrepreneurs. Note entrepreneurs, and I want to better understand my ideal clients. Really appreciate you dedicating your time to this. Here's the link to my Calendly for you to book a call. Hopefully you'll find a slot that works for you. If not, just let me know. And she says, I'll book in a slot now. Can't wait to speak. And then we do this interview. And by the way, I do this with two other business owners, Emily Thompson from Being Boss, and I did it with Belinda Weaver from Copyright Matters. All three of them, ideal clients. They all fit into the category of ideal clients that I really want to work with, but don't know how to access. I do the same thing with all of them. I do this interview. They all have the best time because, again, I know as a copywriter that people love to talk about themselves. So I want to center the conversation around them and then just let them talk. And I got so much amazing information from them. Small things like, well, first of all, big things like none of these women call themselves entrepreneurs. They all just call themselves like, I'm an online business owner. And so, and why that's so important is because had I referred to them as an entrepreneur on my website, I would have completely alienated them. Belinda, Emily, and Corey my ideal clients would have gone onto my website and felt like, oh, she's looking for entrepreneurs. That's not me. That's not me. And they would have gone. And so I needed to make sure I used the correct language to attract them. And then I was able to like put in these small things that would allow them to notice themselves. Like each of them, every single one of them spoke about having this kind of morning routine where they would journal every morning, and all of them drank tea, and all of them spoke about this kind of intentional like thinking and reflection. And so I was able to kind of infuse that into my copy and talk about, have lines that spoke about your morning journaling and your cups of tea and your hiking in the mountains and that kind of thing, really specific copy that would speak to them. And bonus, every single one of them hired me to work with them that not long after. Either that year, Emily and Belinda hired me that same year, and Corey hired me the next year because after our conversation, we had such a great conversation. I then went on to create my website. I then went on and I stayed in touch with them, and I pitched them. I was like, look, now you know what I do, and I would love to do this for you. And so if you have any projects in mind, you need any email sequences, think of me. I'm here. And each of them hired me.
That's incredible. Well, I just have to say, we're so aligned on so many things. I think that's why I really was drawn to you and like wanting to have you on our show, because we think alike in so many ways, even in how you phrase the opportunity for someone to get on one of these customer research calls. We actually have this market research training or this workshop called Read Their Minds that used to be part of my 12-month coaching program before I retired from coaching. We're actually planning to bring it back as a standalone digital product in 2024. And it has like scripts for like, how do you get people on a call? What questions do you ask them on a call? How do you really use information like this to niche down? But hearing you share your process, which thank you, by the way, for being so awesome to go find an actual post and read it word for word. I know our listeners love getting to actually hear real life examples of that. So that was really, really powerful. And I just love hearing how it turned out for you, because this is something that I really want to iterate to our listeners. The fact market research not only makes you more attractive to your dream clients because you're able to really infuse their language or their thoughts into your copy like Eman did, but also when you get on these calls like Eman did, you put yourself front of mind for them so that again when they think email they think Iman. And so I just think that this really comes full circle and ties up this case study so beautifully. And I hope for any of you who were really struggling to niche down, that hearing the practical steps for how Iman did it is going to help you be able to more confidently go through this process yourself and see similar results like Iman, where, earlier I alluded to the fact that, you 5 to 6x what your per email rate was, but more so, like you said, you went from making 40, 50, $60,000 a year to now having a very successful six-figure email copywriting business working with your dream clients. So I just think that's so inspiring. Thank you, Iman, for all of your wisdom today and for being so transparent with our listeners. Where can they connect with you next if they want to continue to be in your world?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing. So I have actually have my own podcast called Mistakes That Made Me. And so I think everyone listening to this podcast will love Mistakes That Made Me. It is the podcast where I ask extraordinary business owners to share their biggest business mistake. So you know what not to do on your road to success. And so I have interviewed, I know you've had Laura Belgray on this interview. I loved that interview. On this podcast, I love that interview. I've had Laura on my podcast, Emily Thompson, so many. I hope you will be one of them one day soon. And we just talk about their mistakes and their failures in business, and we really dig into what happened, why it happened, and why they wouldn't change exactly what happened. And so if you love podcasts, go check it out. I just won two podcast awards for that podcast: best business podcast, best new podcast at the Black Pod Awards. Thank you. So it's worth checking out. And you can find me on Instagram at Eman Copy Co. I would love to hear how you like this interview. I come say hi. I'd love to hear from you. And again, my books are always open to work with new clients. So if you need support with your emails, your launch, you can find me at emancopyco.com. Just head over to the contact page, fill in the form, and then we can chat about working together. I also have a 90-minute masterclass called Nail Your Niche, that where I talk about this whole topic, and I talk about how to become the go-to, where I talk about how to become the go-to expert after you have decided on your niche. So if you like this topic, I have a few more things to say about that. I usually sell it for $150, but I want to give it to all your listeners for free. So I'll give you the link. Of course, I'll give you the link so that you can put that in your show notes. And if anyone wants to go grab the masterclass and hear just a little bit more about this topic, I have some more ideas on this. You'll hear a lot of what I say here in that masterclass, but there's some other golden nuggets in there as well. Go get it for free. I'll make sure that you have the code so that everyone knows where to find it.
That's so wonderful. And I love that podcast name, by the way, Mistakes That Made Me. First of all, sucker for alliteration, but also such a great concept because we all need to be able to more openly share our missteps and how we came out of them even wiser, even stronger. And I think that all of the best entrepreneurs I know, which by the way is funny, the whole time you were saying how none of them resonated with the identity entrepreneur. I must be the odd duckling out because I totally resonate deeply with that word, more so than online business owner. But anyways, I digress. That's a totally different tangent.
No, I could have guessed. As I was saying it, I guessed. I was like, yeah, Ellen's. This is not. Yeah, yeah, no. I was like, yeah, no. Ellen's definitely seen herself as an entrepreneur.
That is so funny. Anyways, who knows why different brains make different connections, but I just I think that's so smart to be able to talk about the things that we have navigated because each of us live a different life, right? So we have different paths that we have walked, and to be able to turn behind you and say, "Hey, there was a pothole, don't step there." Like that is so helpful. That's why I love this world of podcasting, is getting to hear so many unique stories like yours. So, Iman, again, thank you so much for joining us, and all of you listeners, we'll catch you in next week's episode.